to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 193 with Thomas Fabbri. Art of Adventure is the podcast that helps you travel the world, run your business, and embark on an epic quest. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. Head over to derekloudermilk.com to check out the show notes and grab your copy of the top 10 ways to earn money online. That's a PDF guide that I've put together for you guys. And while you're over there, check out Adventure Quest in Bali in April 2018, April 20 to 27. This is an awesome trip I've put together for entrepreneurs who are tired of thinking small and want to be courageous and lead their tribe to something really big. This is what you guys asked for. And we put together a really amazing trip, canyoning, surfing, volcano climbing, along with business and leadership workshops, and a few surprises. So check that out, and let's have a conversation to see if that is right for you. In today's episode, we have Tom Fabbri, and he is quite the adventurer. He's done a lot of different things. And right now he's in the middle of completing the Adventure Grandslam, which is summiting the highest peak in every continent. And he has done 6 of the 7, and he has only got Mount Everest left to go. But he didn't even start mountaineering until later in his life, after he was Mr. Natural Universe at the age of 52. He's also a private pilot, a chef, a health expert, and the author of Ageless You. We've got some pretty interesting mountaineering stories for you, what it's like to be trapped in a snowstorm, and a pretty interesting story about how he used a satellite link to speak at a conference on another continent while he was trapped in that snowstorm. We dig into fear and motivation and how mountaineering and adventuring all ties in with success, and also what it takes to prepare and get to some of these major mountaineering summits. So if you ever wanted to climb the highest peak in Antarctica or in Russia, now you can know how to do that. So without further ado, here is Tom Fabbri. Welcome back to The Art of Adventure. Today, I'm joined by Thomas Fabbri. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I see a lot of similarities between us. We both have a broad variety of interests and, achieved things in areas that are not super similar. And I'm also really excited to hear about your mountaineering quest in the Adventure Grandslam, because that's actually something that I don't have a lot of experience with. I've summited peaks in Colorado. That's just hiking, but you're on the technical mountaineering side. And I'd actually love to start off hearing about some of your climbs. I know you've finished 6 of the world's 7 tallest summits on each continent?
Yes. The for your audience, if they don't know, the 7 summits is the highest peak on each of the 7 continents. So this last year, the end of 2016, the middle of November into the middle of December, I went down to Antarctica to climb the highest peak down there, which is Vincent Massif. Mount Vincent Massive, and it's not a high peak per se, but it's just over 16,000. It's 16,067 feet. But just getting to Antarctica is an adventure in and of itself. And that was number 6 for me. And the next peak that I have to climb is Everest. But I have to tell you, I typically, when I go on these big adventures, I train for about a year. And I'm into health and wellness, and I go to the gym on a regular basis. I run stairs, and I'm a personal trainer myself, but I also, because I want to up my game and be my best, I hired a coach, and I've hired a coach for the next adventures coming up. But going on these big adventures, tackling these highest peaks on the seven continents has really pushed me almost to my limits, mentally, physically, emotionally, as I like to say. The physical side is one thing, but then once you get there and you embrace what the mountain can throw at you, it's a whole different ball game. It really, taking on these huge adventures has literally changed my life for the better, obviously, for the better.
And how long does it take to summit Vinson? What was that like?
It was like a 3 week adventure from start to finish. But once we got to the glacier where that's where base camp was. It was really about a 9 day climb from base camp, summiting and going back down to base camp. The mountain itself wasn't that big, but the challenges that we faced, just getting our gear up and down the mountain was a challenge. Pulling a sled, the severe cold, as you know, Antarctica is the coldest place on Earth, and the average temperature was about between minus 35 and minus 40 Celsius. And so I really didn't take into account, I was just looking at the altitude of the Mount Vinson Massif. And I've been to obviously higher peaks, and I trained really hard, but the severe cold, which can bring on dehydration, which can bring on muscle cramping. That's what really caught me by surprise. When we left base camp, we carry a 50 to 60 pound pack, which is not overly challenging, but because we're all in, peak physical condition. But then we had to pull at least a 50 to 60 pound sled behind us. And you're roped up. We were a team of 5. We're roped up, wearing crampons, all the gear, ice axe, and traveling 6 to 8 hours a day. And it really took me by surprise. So it took me a few days to really get acclimated. And like I said, it caught me by surprise. But that's part of the deal when you go on an adventure like this. You can train, and I live in Long Island, New York, and it's pretty rural. It's flat, so and the weather is not. It's not like Antarctica at all.
Is there any way to prepare for that kind of cold?
Well, you could probably go out to, Colorado in the wintertime, or you could go out to. I've done some seminars out in Seattle on Mount Rainier. I've climbed Mount Rainier a couple of times. And I'm not doing these adventures on a regular basis. I'm not doing 2 or 3 a year. Everything that I do is, flying the jet or the helicopter, or it has to do with adventure. But something like this, it's really special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really special, and it's isolated, and it's not like I would be going down to, and there's a cost factor too, financial. I mean, I flew from JFK Airport down to Punta Arenas, Chile, and then from Punta Arenas, that's you probably know where that's at. That's just about on the southernmost tip of South America. From there, we took a Russian Ilyushin cargo jet. It's a Russian Ilyushin 76, a big 4-engine cargo jet. And we chartered that. That's a $30,000 ticket per person.
Oh, wow.
Round trip. Yeah. And it's really, you only get there based on the weather. When you go down to Antarctica, you're landing on a blue ice runway. There's no airport down there. And it's a visual approach. They have a weather observer on the field, but he's just giving you, visibility, ceiling in the wind. So, and if it's not good, you're not going. And once you get there, if they can't get back, tell them, okay, we're going to be down here, for 3 weeks, and it may take 4 to 5 weeks for them to come and get you based on the weather. So,
yeah,
and you're down there, you're down in Antarctica.
So you have plenty of supplies for after the summit, just in
Yeah,
case it is a long stay.
yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, it's very challenging, very challenging. So you have to be fully prepared with your gear, how much food you bring, how much fuel for making your meals, and we're melting snow and preparing for any snowstorms. We all have satellite phones, so we're connected back to the United States. It takes definitely a lot of preparation, a lot of mental preparation, but you don't start out like, oh, hey, I'm interested in climbing, and or mountain climbing these big mountains, and say, okay, I think I want to go to Mount Aconcagua in the Andes Mountains, or I want to go to Mount McKinley, or I want to go down to Antarctica. That's not the way to do it. And I've seen some people try to attempt that, and it just turns out horrible. It turns out
Because
horrible.
those are bigger and more challenging and harder to get to, and all those things. So you start somewhere easier. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Start out with hiking in Colorado, right? I mean that's challenging. I've taken people up to Mount Washington in New Hampshire, and that's only over 7,000 feet. And I've had people they've had to turn around, because number one, they're not in shape. Number two, they don't know how to take care of themselves, and on and on. So just like with any business venture or relationship or whatever, you start out with taking baby steps, right?
Sure. Yeah. Make the make the target closer at first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started out years ago because of a gentleman that I was flying the helicopter with, and he would go down to Mexico and climb some of the volcanoes down there. And to me, it sounded like really cool stuff, very adventurous. And I'm like, hey, how did you start? And he told me go out to Mount Rainier. There's an outfit out there called RMI Guides,
Yep.
and it's a good way to sort of segue into mountain climbing. And I've always been sort of a gym rat. I've always been in the gym, and I used to be a competitive natural bodybuilder, and I take care of myself. I've graduated culinary school to learn more about nutrition and food prep. But when I went out to Mount Rainier, and Mount Rainier is 14,410 feet, I thought I was in good shape. But this was a different deal, and I'll tell you, it kicked my ass. And I was like, holy cow. I summited, but it was extremely difficult, wearing all the gear and the boots and backpacks, and the altitude. I wasn't used to the altitude. And
So what was your weak point then?
my weak point then was there was a couple of weak points. Number one was really being in cardiovascular shape, endurance.
Okay.
The second weak link was not understanding the gear, not understanding wearing the proper boots, wearing the proper gear. I mean, they hand you the gear. Okay, go get size 10 Scarpa boot, or whatever, but not knowing how to use the gear properly. Another weak point was nutrition on the mountain. Staying hydrated constantly. If you're going to do, say, a 1 day climb, bringing 2 Nalgene bottles with you, roughly 2 liters of water, staying hydrated. You climb for 45 minutes, you rest for 15. Stay hydrated, stay warm, and get some food in you constantly, because you're constantly burning calories. So there was a couple of weak points, but I've worked on the weak points. And so now when I go into a climb, but still, you never fully realize the unknown. When I was in Antarctica this last climb, I mean, I was very well prepared, but I was not prepared for how super cold. You can look at the temperature on a scale and say, okay, minus 35 C. And it sounds cold, but once you're there,
It's hard to know what that is going to be like because it's so far out of our normal
Yeah, it's like, what does
experience.
that feel like? you know, and it took me by surprise. And then we did get caught in a snowstorm at Camp One, and we had 80 to 90-mile-an-hour winds. And if you can imagine what that's like a Hurricane One force winds, right? And it destroyed our tent. It destroyed our snow walls. It destroyed our camp, and we were really hanging on for dear life. And there's two things: nobody's coming to get you, right? It's not like, okay, I'm in a storm and I want to go home. That's not the deal. You have to deal with it. But you're prepared for these things. You're
So
prepared.
it destroyed your tent. Does that mean you were exposed to the wind?
No, we actually, all the tent poles bent and broke, and me and my tent mates were laying in the tent as it was collapsed on us, and we were holding it down with our weight.
And wow, and it was probably flapping around a lot.
Oh, it was flapping around. It was noisy. It was scary. It was so, and it lasted. I think it lasted for about 16 hours. So it started off small and progressed, and we tried to keep the snow walls up, but then it became too much to even go outside the tent. And then slowly, one by one, the tent poles, and they're made out of aluminum, you know,
Yeah.
and they just started to bend and snap and come apart. And so the whole tent just collapsed around us. It was pretty incredible. But then it cleared up the next day, and we got our stuff together, and we continued on. But I will tell you, the stress of going through the storm and just kind of hanging on, and if we did lose the tent, it would not have been. I don't think it would have ended well. You don't want to be exposed to those types of temperatures and those types of winds. So, because of all the stress of that, I pulled a muscle in my lower back. I just had to do complete rest for the next day, and then the day after that, then I was good to go. I took some Tylenol, and I was good to go. And usually don't take anything, but the next day we went up to high camp, and we did have some spare tents
So
with us.
when the in the middle of the storm, when the tent poles were breaking, and I'm guessing you probably didn't know exactly how long it would last, what was what was going on in your mind? Like what kind of what was happening for you personally at that moment?
That's a good question, because like I said, we're prepared for those things, but there is fear that is going through your mind. What's going to happen? Our only shell between us and these horrific winds and the super cold is breaking down, and I guess just a lot of anxiety, and you kind of revert into survival mode and just holding on to what we had. We didn't want to lose the tent per se, although it did come down around us, and then just hanging on. Eventually, we knew that the storm will subside, but we didn't know when. I've been in other snowstorms where people have died, and they have died due to exposure. So I'm well aware of that. But you really go into survival mode. Like I said, there is some fear, there's some anxiety. That's how I ended up, stressing out over it, because, it's not like you have to face your fear, though. You have to face your fear. There's no going back. So you have to, in your mind, think that, okay, eventually this is going to go away. The snowstorm will go away. But what do we do right now? Right now, we need to hold on to our tent as best we can. Because if we do end up losing the tent, people will die. So there's lots of anxiety, there's stress. You're trying to deal with the stress, stay calm, think clearly, go into sort of this survival mode. There's lots of things going on, and everybody deals with it differently, right? And I was with two tent mates,
Yeah.
and there was two tents, a team of five, three of us in one tent, two in another tent, and our tent didn't hold up at all. And everybody deals with it differently, and we're all experienced climbers, so we're not that you're used to this, but you've dealt with harsh situations before. So, and you have to come together as a team. Teamwork and leadership is really key in these kind of situations. So, you discuss what your options are. Somebody ultimately will make a decision, but you look at your options. So that's
Do you have a designated leader?
Yes, we do. Absolutely, absolutely.
Was that someone that you all voted, or did you hire someone, or how did that?
Well, I don't know if you, in the climbing world, we actually hired Dave Hahn. Dave Hahn has been to Everest 22 times, and he summited 15 times. He's like the Michael Jordan of the climbing world.
Okay, so he's a really experienced team member.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So he was definitely the strong link there, and we were all strong climbers, but somebody ultimately has to make, the decisions. So can't be bickering back and forth, because that doesn't bode well, especially in those types of situations. So yes, but Dave wasn't in our tent, but he was in the next tent over.
And are you guys able to communicate during the windstorm, or is it like each tent for themselves?
No, we're within 5 feet of each other, So our deal was just to hunker down, hang on, and wait it out. We had food with us, we had water, so that was fine. We weren't going to make any hot meals or anything like that, because it was impossible. It was just impossible to do.
How long could the storm have gone on?
Well, it could have gone on for days. When I was in Aconcagua, I was in a snowstorm for 3 days. That's really the longest I've been in a snowstorm, but it could go on for a week, right? So, and that hopefully, that doesn't happen, but it could happen, and you just have to be prepared. We have enough food, we have enough water. If we really had to, we probably could make some water, because you have to melt snow to make water there. But that really, I wasn't concerned about those comforts. We were only in, say, day 2 of the storm by the time it ended.
Yeah.
You start thinking about, well, it's going into day 3, day 4, day 5. But also, we have modern technology with us. So we can get dispatches from Seattle through our satellite phone. I had one. Dave had a satellite phone. I think
to get weather updates.
You get weather updates, and it was interesting. I'll tell you this, Garrett, that a few months before I left for Antarctica, I was invited to go to Zurich, participate in a leadership summit, and give a talk. I was asked to give a talk. This gentleman, Robin Sharma, he's come out with several leadership books.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of him.
Yeah, he invited me to come to Zurich and be a part of his Titan Summit, his leadership summit. And Steve Wozniak from Apple was going to be there speaking, but I said I can't go. I said I'll be in Antarctica, and he's like, "What? What are you doing in Antarctica?" So then I filled him in on the whole story. I said, "Hey, I already had a copy of his book, but I said, send me a copy of your book. I'll carry it to the summit if I can." And I ended up doing that. But during the discussion, I said, "Hey, let's do this. I bring a satellite phone with me, and I can, we can test it when I get down there. But how about if I call in to your summit? to your leadership summit. And based on the timing and the schedule, his summit, leadership summit, was going to be December 4th through December 7th. And I looked at our climbing schedule, and I was going to be somewhere around the summit of Mount Vincent Massive during that time. And I
Oh,
told,
wow.
yeah, and I told Robin Sharma, I said, what if I call into your leadership summit?
From the summit.
Summit, and he's like blown away. He's like, wow, that's so cool. He's like, can you pull it off? And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. you know, just kind of putting it out there. And what ended up happening was he got all set up, his event planner. I mean, you're a speaker, so you have event planners, and they had pictures of me on stage, and they had everything set up. And it happened to be a Sunday, December 4th at 9:30 a.m. Antarctic time, and it was going to be 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon, Zurich, Switzerland time. And it was gonna work out perfectly. But the caveat was that's when the storm hit us.
Oh.
It worked out. It was incredible. The storm started in the morning, and the winds at the time when I was supposed to call in were probably 40 to 50 miles an hour, which may sound bad, but it wasn't that bad. But it was very difficult. So imagine this, Derek. I'm in the tent. I have all my gear on except my boots, right? And I'm kind of half in my down sleeping bag. I have my little satellite phone propped up in front of me with my earpiece in, and I call in. I call to New York, and then New York, I get a transfer to Zurich, and we make a connection. We talk to the stage manager. His name was Jeff. He's like, "Hey Tom, I got you. We got a good signal. I'm gonna put you on hold." And I'm like, "What? You're gonna put me on hold? Don't put me on hold." And he puts me on hold, and I'm in this. The storm is picking up, and the winds are howling. The tent is flapping, the tent walls, and they put me on hold for 9 minutes. And luckily, I don't know if you've ever used a satellite phone, but you can lose a signal,
Yeah.
just like that. But so I'm kneeling, and I'm in the tent, and I'm watching the little timer on the phone. It's just ticking by. And after 9 minutes, then they introduce me, and Robin Sharma comes on. And he's like, "Hey, we have Tom Fabbri. He's in Antarctica." And Robin had at his leadership summit, I think he had like 140 people at his event, and they're CEOs and they're business owners and whatnot, and they paid like $40,000 a ticket to go to this event.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And we talk about fear. But I said, "Hey Robin, it's great to be here." I said, "Welcome to Antarctica." I said, "But I have to tell you, I'm in the middle of a snowstorm, and it's building, and it's horrific, and I may lose you at any minute." But I said, "I'm grateful to be here." And so we talked about being grateful. We talked about fear and struggle and overcoming it. All the while, I was in this snowstorm. So I have to be honest with you, it couldn't have worked out better. I mean, obviously, as a speaker, I would have wanted to have been in Zurich, Switzerland, up on stage. But to be in this platform, the coldest place on earth, and here I am talking to his audience via satellite phone in a snowstorm.
That's crazy. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it worked out. I mean, you dream about these things, because I've always, he's got a big presence in the speaking world and leadership world, and I always wanted to be a part of one of his events, and he invited me, but I happened to be on the other side of the planet. And the vision actually worked out better than I could have imagined. And he asked me, he's having another leadership summit this December 7th in Toronto, Canada, and he asked me to come up. So
Did you say, sure, I'll join you from a different mountain?
Well, that may happen. That may happen maybe in 2018 or 2019, but it kind of blew him away, the whole thing. But me, I was just like, I'm a big believer in vision boards, and envisioning just like these summits.
Mm-hmm.
I'll set up my vision board and I'll, take a picture of me on the summit of a large mountain peak, and I envision myself being for this summit, it was Mount Vincent Massive in Antarctica, and I envisioned myself being there and going through all the steps, though, to make it reality. But this actually worked out better than I ever could have imagined. So it was just,
it's so cool.
Snowstorm, and I'm grateful for Robin Sharma and the speaking event and all that, but I'm also grateful to be alive. So
sure. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very unique and remarkable experience.
Yeah.
So you had the opportunity to share, to talk about fear with Robin's audience and, share some of your experience and try to help the attendees of that conference. But broadly speaking, what are the ways that an adventurer can use their experience of adventuring to come back and inspire or influence? What ways have you used to do that, rather than just saying, I did this cool stuff, you can do it too? That seems pretty simple, and people obviously know that. So how do you effectively use going on an adventure to help other people? Or
yeah well, that's a good question, because obviously I wasn't born this way, right? And everything that I do is a learned experience. I will be honest with you that, growing up, I didn't have the greatest childhood. And so I'd been homeless, in and out of jail numerous times, bankrupt, divorced, drinking, drugging. And what saved me was having somebody come into my life, a mentor, saying that, yes, you can do this. And the can do this for me was becoming a pilot. And that's why I think in the beginning I told you that aviation had saved my life. And becoming a pilot wasn't an easy task, but I saw the lifestyle that they were leading, and I wanted to attempt that. And that's all you really can do, is attempt things, I think. But, there are fears associated with that. And the reason why I was getting into all this was this trouble early on in my life was fears, fears that I had. And I wasn't really taught how to deal with fears. And I don't think, and I still believe that today, that we're not taught how to deal with fear. Now I understand. And when I talk to an audience, or when I talk to an individual, or if I'm coaching somebody, fear is an opportunity. Okay. Society today has taught us that, fear is a bad thing, but fear is a good thing. That's how I look at fear, whether I'm in a snowstorm, or if I'm going to get up on stage, or if I'm, writing a new book, or I have a big flight around the world, flying the jet. There are fears there. What about the bad weather? What about this? What about that? Well, those are opportunities to discover things about yourself. They're opportunities to learn. If I'm fearful of getting up on stage, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. That's me becoming more aware. I'm getting energized. It's really excitement. You know what it's like to be a speaker. And I mentioned the speaking because most people most people are afraid of
Right.
getting in front of a couple of people and talking. And I used to be that way, I used to be that way, but I just see the opportunities of getting in front of an audience and sharing all my stories and helping them to grow. And so, but it doesn't start out that way. It's a learned experience, taking baby steps, small steps. So, I'm taking larger steps with my life now, traveling around the world and, climbing and, doing all these things that I'm doing, speaking and writing books. But I used to be afraid of all of that stuff. I used to be afraid of, relationships. But I like to say that to overcome these fears that we all have, you need not the courage to climb a mountain. That's a good metaphor. We all have our mountains to climb, but using everyday courage. And what is everyday courage? Everyday courage to me is like telling my son that I love him. When he comes in the door, I give him a hug and I tell him I love him. When I was growing up, my father would never tell me. He never told me that he loved me. And that kind of shaped my life in the beginning. Having the courage to talk to your boss and ask for a raise. Those simple everyday things that we don't think about. Even for some people, getting out of bed in the morning. People are afraid to get out of bed in the morning. And we need to overcome those fears. People hate their jobs. They hate what they're doing. And I'm sure what you're doing, sharing what, adventure, I mean, to me, life is an adventure, right? Life is an adventure. You don't need to go climb a mountain. You don't even necessarily have to travel around the world. You could go down to the corner coffee shop and grab a good book and have a great cup of coffee and interact with some people down there. That could be your adventure.
So let me tell you where this question is coming from. Partly, it's mostly for myself as well. I would love to think that simply by me using courage or living adventurously will set a good example and just say, here's what's possible. That's sort of a very hopeful thing. I'd love to have, clear evidence that that's actually helping people. So how do you measure, or how do you convince yourself that the adventures you're doing are sort of for the greater good, or are they just selfish for making yourself the best version that you can be and hoping that trickles down? How do you think about that?
It's really the latter, but it's kind of twofold. I mean, I started these adventures, and even I could take aviation as an adventure, but then expanding on that, it started out to be a selfish thing, because I'll tell you why. It needs to be selfish. Okay, you need to take care of yourself first before you can take care of anybody else. I mean, that's kind of like if you have an empty cup, how can you give water or whatever to anybody else? You need to have your cup filled. Okay, does that make sense? So
Sure.
it started out being very selfish for me, but as I started taking on challenges that I was actually afraid of, because I'm afraid of heights, and here I am, up at 45,000 feet and flying, and then I start taking on these big mountains, and I'm literally afraid to do it. But like we talked about, fear is it's really it's your body telling you that there's something to learn here. Okay, whether you go over it, under it, through it, or however, but it's a good thing. But being selfish is definitely an excellent thing. But I do believe that you have to live your life with love, respect. The value that governs all other values, to me, is integrity, right? So, I mean, if you're living this life of, sharing and giving and loving and a life of integrity and walking your talk, that's important. Walking your talk, then it will trickle down to other people. And that's what I found out. And that's how I stepped into the writing my books. And that's how I stepped into the speaking world. Although I did The way I came about my whole life of living this adventurous life was, I went back to my childhood when really wanted to step into my purpose. My purpose is to inspire others to live their best life. That's my purpose. And how do I do that? I do that by living my best life. And what is my best life? I went back to my childhood and I journaled about what made me happy as a little kid, as a little 5, 6, 7 year old. And what I used to dream about as a little kid was being this sort of Jacques Cousteau adventurer, but my own version of that. I'm sure you know who Jacques
Yeah,
Cousteau is.
the oceanographer.
The oceanographer, the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau. I used to watch his shows and I'd be like, oh my God, this guy's he's amazing. He's diving, he's writing, he's a filmmaker, he's flying around, he's doing all these amazing things. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. But how do you do that? How do you do that? And I went off the rails early in my life and I went through all these bad things, but I learned from that. I share those stories now. I share those stories because everybody's got a story. And but I think it's important. It was for me to go back to my childhood when nobody really could tell you what to do. I mean, you dreamed of maybe being a baseball player, a Mickey Mantle, or a Johnny Unitas football player, or whatever. You had no inhibitions until you get older. Then your teachers and your parents say, well, you can't do that. You can't be a musician. You can't do that. You have to go out and you have to go to college and get a job. That's your life. Well, I think that the reason why people self-medicate and why we have so many problems in the U.S. and around the world is because people are not living their dream life. They've been educated right out of their creativity. And so I didn't go to college and and not that I'm against education, that formal, I'm not totally against it, but it really can stifle people and they kind of get boxed into what society wants them to do. And so when I get a client or when I'm talking to people about, are you living your dream life? I gave a talk up at the University of Toronto to PhD students, and I told them, I said, have the courage, have the guts. If you're not living your dream life right now, get up out of this class and walk out. Well, nobody had the guts to do it then, but I did speak with the professor. He's a friend of mine, Dr. Greg Wells. I did speak with him a couple of weeks later because I did his podcast. And he's like, you know what, Tom? I ran into one of my PhD students in the hallway, and she's leaving my class because she's contemplating her life. And I said, that made me feel so good. But it's hard to have the courage to do what you want in life. And so so going back to your dream life and the fears, journal, about what your dream life would look like, and then you start living on purpose. So it does become a selfish thing in the beginning, but once you start doing that, people start looking at you like, well, maybe he's crazy, but but that's okay, But then you're happy and you're successful, and you have to, not necessarily financially, but what's success, right? You have to determine what success is for yourself, and you start living this successful, adventurous life, whatever that is for you, and it just becomes this amazing journey. So it does start with being selfish, and then it will start to trickle down because you have an impact on the world. You have an impact on everybody you meet. And it's just fantastic. I mean, I didn't know how I was going to break into the speaking world, but it's coming to me because that's what I want to do. I want to share my message. How do I do that? I don't know. There's some right? Yeah, I mean, you don't know, but you step into it. You step over those walls. You step through those walls because now you're on purpose. you're on purpose, whatever your dream life. I'm sure you're living yours. I believe, you're traveling around the world and you have a podcast show, and I think you're coming out with a book, and,
You've done
health.
your homework.
Yeah, health is important to you. You learn to take care of your body. Things become more important to you than just 9 to 5. I'm waiting for, the weekend, and, I want to get in front of the TV and open up a cold beer. I mean, just that type of life that we're not meant to live. We're not meant to live. And, we're kind of losing our creativity. And, I believe in my dreams, and they're big dreams. They put a lot of fear into my life, but that fear is, I tell people, if you're not scaring yourself at least once a week, you're not living. You need to go out and scare yourself. And whatever that fear is, I mean, I could have never, when I started this Adventure Grandslam a few years ago, I was fearful of the mountain climbing, and it's still, let me tell you, it gets my attention, really, because I
Yeah.
have to, it gets your attention. But it's opened up so many doors for me by me facing my fears. And, not everybody's going to be on board with you, but this is my life. It's not your life. It's none of my business what you think of me. If you think about that, it's none of my business what you think of me. But I'm on purpose, and I'm impacting a lot of people, and I love it. And it's just, I think it's an amazing journey, and we need to start teaching our young children that they can start this journey early on in life. I started it a little bit later. I use all my hardships and struggles from my early life, my father coming to bail me out of jail and asking me, when is this all going to end? And I'm telling him, I don't know, uh, but those are great stories. And people, after a talk, when I open up and I become vulnerable, right? When you open up, when you wear your heart on your sleeve and you open up, sometimes I tear up on some of these talks that I give, because I get so emotional. I ask people, you need to be emotional about your life, because at some point you're going to die, right? You're going to die, and
Yeah.
it may matter or it may not matter, but you can have a great impact on people that you meet. And we all want connection, right? Don't we want to be connected with? You're trying to connect with people. I know you are. That's why you're doing.
Absolutely. You got business that makes sure that I do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're doing will impact other people, and then they'll start to, they start thinking about their life. And it does take courage. Let me tell you, it does take courage for a PhD student who her parents are paying for her 4-year, whatever, 6-year college, and to tell her folks, hey, I want to go become an artist, or whatever, right? I mean, it takes courage to do that. But when you start doing that, when you start embracing the fear, stepping into it, a calmness will come over you, and you'll start really living your life. You'll start really living your life, and you become happy, and you're living on purpose, and you're walking your talk, and you're making an impact either in your community or with your family or with other people. I mean, it's so important. It's so important. I hope that answers your question. I kind of went on a little bit there.
Yeah. I think that is helpful for me and for other people to understand how, by simply being more true to your dreams, that can be useful and impactful. Because I think people fall into the trap of like, okay, I need to go out there and change the world, and it's obviously if you have enough energy to take care of your own life, then you can start impacting other people. So it sort of does have to be selfish.
It does, Derek, because I learned this when I became an airline pilot, and nobody pays attention to the flight attendant giving the briefing, but they should. But when she tells you, or he tells you, when the mask drops from the ceiling, you put it on yourself first, then you take the other one and put it on your child. Okay? You have to, it's a must. You have to take care of yourself first. How can you build a great business? How can you build a great family? How can you have a great relationship if you're sick and you can't get out of bed in the morning? You can't. So that type of self-love, or if you want to call it selfishness, it's a must. It's a must. And a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, oh, well, I give to my family and I don't have time to work out and I don't have time to eat right. And well, if you don't make time for yourself, then you're going to make time for putting yourself in a pine box. People, they don't understand that. That goes back to that simple Eastern philosophy of, you can't give if your cup is already empty, right? Mm-hmm. You can't. And I know you understand that. And you need to fill your well first and then give. But it is, I understand it is a hard thing to do. It took me a long time to really understand the journey that I was on. And it helps me to overcome, and I still have fears. Like I said, I think they're a good thing. To have fears is a good thing, and they're just a roadmap, or they're a signpost, they're a lesson to learn. There's something here to learn. If I'm afraid of getting up on stage, for an example, then maybe I'm not prepared. Right? I need to prepare better.
Yep, that's the best way to not be worried. To be really well prepared. Yep.
Yeah, winging it doesn't work out too well. So.
Yeah.
And I've tried to do that. So.
Well, Tom, I have one final question for you.
Sure.
If you could change or add something to the world, what would you wish for the world to have?
I would wish for the world to have great health. I plan on living for a long, long time, and I've seen what is going on in the sort of health and wellness industry, and I don't like it. People are sick for no reason. People are not taking care of themselves. And going back to what I said a little bit earlier, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. So that's sort of my underlying message for what I'm doing. I'm a big believer in good nutrition. And I mean, to have health means a lot of different things. It's not just exercise and eating well. It's having love and being social, having a great family and being happy and living this adventurous life. But true health, we're born with one body. And I think we've been given this amazing gift, and it's an amazing body. And why would you destroy it with, smoking and drinking and thinking bad thoughts and just the abuse that we do to our bodies? That's what I would wish, is for the world to understand that, hey, my health is most important, because then I can do I can live this amazing life. It's what brought me on this journey here. I can't climb these great mountains. I can't fly jets. I can't stand in front of an audience and be my best if I'm not feeling my best. And I can't present myself as well. I think it's a key element. I mean, obviously you could talk about world peace, or you could talk about different things. But I think if people went inward and really started taking care of themselves, it would be a different world. But that's what I would wish for.
I'm right there with you. Being able to bring the energy every day for challenges it's so driven by having a strong body to fuel our minds and to fuel courage and all kinds of things. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I see your picture here. You got your arm up and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, the Skype profile picture.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
it's a true statement. I think you understand it, and I think a lot of people don't. You've traveled around the world, and I've been around the world, and I've been to India and some places where poverty, the people in the United States, they don't understand what poverty is. You go to India, um, countries like that, and you see real poverty and people in real pain, and they're just, they're like, what?
Yeah.
You have a toilet with water in it? What?
I learned from one of our other guests recently that, there's the whole, the 1% movement, but if you make more than $30,000 a year, you are in the 1% globally.
Yeah.
And if you make more than $600 a year, you're in the top half globally.
That's incredible, right? That's just amazing.
Yeah, blew my mind.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, Tom, I want to take a second to acknowledge you for living adventurously and being an example for someone that we can all look to see what it's like when someone really has their cup full and they're living in alignment with their purpose. It's really inspiring for me, and I'm sure all the listeners to hear that someone is going for something like the Adventure Grandslam and doing a bunch of other things. So yeah, I really acknowledge you for just living in integrity. It definitely shows. So thank you for being that example. And how can people find you online?
Go to my website, my email is tom@tomfabbri.com, but my website is tomfabbri.com. Just type in my name. My books are on Amazon or on my website, but I'd rather you just follow my adventures and what we're doing. I'm on this book and speaking tour now, which is very cool. And I'm preparing for the next big adventures, sort of this triple play that's coming up. South Pole, North Pole, and Everest. But go to my website. That's the best way. I'd love it if you send me an email, what's going on, or LinkedIn, all the social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm always posting video on Instagram, all the social media outlets.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today, Thomas. It was really nice to have you.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure. Thanks, Derek. Appreciate everything.
All right. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. Another awesome episode with Tom Fabbri makes me want to go to Mount Rainier and learn how to be a mountaineer. Mountaineer on Mount Rainier. How about that? If you are inspired to get some adventure in your life after listening to this episode, which, come on, you gotta be, check out Adventure Quest. I've created this is the third Adventure Quest we've done. We're improving it every time with feedback, and we've created especially for entrepreneurs who want to get out there and get adventure back into their lives, but are also super high achievers. So this is a retreat where you'll be learning from some really awesome business and leadership mentors in between all the amazing adventures that we're going to do. This will guarantee we are going to get you out of your comfort zone many times during the week, which is exactly what you need if you're going to be a courageous leader these days. So let's have a conversation about that. Check out Adventure Quest Bali on derekloudermilk.com and let's see if it's right for you. Thanks so much for listening. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.